Imagine, just for a moment, really try to picture this. You are standing in the middle of the most violent, unforgiving environment on Earth.
Right. It's an intense image.
It really is. It's pitch black. The air is incredibly thick, and every single breath you take tastes like sulfur, burning rubber, and just pulverized concrete.
Yeah.
Tracers are zipping overhead. They're illuminating the darkness in these violent flashes. And every shadow, every doorway, every pile of rubble could be hiding a lethal threat.
Which is a terrifying reality.
Completely terrifying. Now, in an environment like this, the decisions you make don't just impact, a quarterly earnings report or a project top line. They literally dictate who lives and who dies.
Exactly. The stakes are absolute.
Right. So imagine realizing that in this terrifying, infinitely chaotic place, the only thing separating absolute victory from catastrophic failure isn't the weapons you carry. It's not the billions of dollars of technology backing you up, or even your raw physical strength. It is simply and undeniably leadership.
That's the core of it.
It is. Welcome to our deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to be here with our resident expert to get into this. We have an incredibly heavy, profoundly transformative stack of material to get through today.
We really do. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to dig into this.
Me too. We are looking at first-hand accounts from the 2006 Battle of Ramadi in Iraq. Specifically, we're pulling from Task Unit Bruiser, drawn from the book Extreme Ownership: How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win by Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin.
It is a remarkable and, at times, very sobering text to dissect. We're essentially analyzing the realities of urban combat through the eyes of two highly experienced Navy SEAL officers.
Yeah, the mission of this deep dive is to extract these hard-won, blood-soaked battlefield principles and decode them. We want to understand the underlying mechanics of these intense situations so that you, listening right now, can translate them into practical tools for your own life, your career, and the incredibly complex dynamics you navigate every single day.
What's fascinating here is how military combat acts as a magnifying glass for human dynamics. I mean, in our normal day-to-day lives, poor leadership might result in, say, a missed deadline.
Right, or a frustrated employee.
Exactly. Or maybe a gradual decline in company morale. Because the feedback loop is so slow, it can take months or even years for the consequences of bad decisions to fully materialize. We can hide behind excuses for a very long time.
We really can. But combat doesn't let you do that.
No, it doesn't. In combat, the feedback loop is immediate and severe. Excuses cost lives. Yet underneath that extreme pressure, the core mechanics of human teamwork, the way trust is built or destroyed, the way communication flows or bottlenecks, it remains completely identical whether you are sitting in a boardroom, managing a classroom, or maneuvering through a war zone.
Okay, let's unpack this by jumping right into the deep end of the source material. We are in Ramadi, Iraq. It's a dark night. Leif Babin, who is the SEAL Ground Force commander for this specific operation, is out with an explosive ordnance disposal operator and EOD tech.
Right, the bomb expert.
Exactly. They are part of a larger SEAL assault force working alongside Iraqi soldiers on a highly sensitive mission to capture or kill a notorious al-Qaeda in Iraq emir.
A very high-stakes target.
Very. So they blow the door to the target building, the dust settles, and suddenly someone yells that there's a squirter.
A suspect fleeing the scene.
Right. Leif and the EOD tech take off, sprinting after this guy down a narrow, pitch-black alleyway. Now, as someone reading this, my immediate thought is, wait, why are two highly trained guys abandoning the main force to chase one runner in a pitch-black, hostile city? What's the tactical thinking there?
It's a great question, and it really highlights the friction of these environments. A squirter in this context isn't just someone running away from a crime scene like a shoplifter.
Right, it's way more dangerous.
Extremely. In Ramadi in 2006, a fleeing suspect could be the high-value target himself attempting to escape. Or it could be an insurgent maneuvering to flank the assault force.
Wow.
Or, terrifyingly, it could be someone trying to gain enough distance to detonate an explosive suicide vest without being immediately shot. The tactical imperative is to neutralize that unknown variable immediately.
So you really have to put yourself in their boots. Adrenaline is spiking. They are chasing a man in a traditional Iraqi dishdasha robe.
Yes.
They finally tackle him to the dirt. But before they can even search him to see if he's holding a live grenade or a detonator, the entire situation deteriorates in a matter of seconds.
It's the worst-case scenario.
It goes from a tense foot chase to a total nightmare. Leif looks down the alley through his green night vision goggles, and suddenly, just 40 yards away, 7 or 8 men round the corner.
And they are not friendly forces.
No, they aren't friendly Iraqi forces. They are heavily armed enemy fighters carrying AK-47s, a belt-fed machine gun, and an RPG-7, a shoulder-fired rocket.
Just devastating firepower.
Yeah. And Leif and his EOD tech are completely cut off from their SEAL assault force. They have an unsecured, unsearched prisoner on the ground beneath them. They are outnumbered, vastly outgunned, and they have no communication with their main unit.
The natural biological human response in that exact fraction of a second is an amygdala hijack.
Absolute panic.
Absolute panic. Your brain is suddenly flooded with a dozen urgent, competing priorities, all screaming for your attention simultaneously.
Do I search the prisoner?
Right. Do I grab my radio and call for backup? Do I abandon the prisoner and run? Do I raise my rifle and shoot?
But yielding to that panic gets you killed.
Exactly. Leif has to rely on a training mantra instilled in him by his task unit commander, Jocko. Relax, look around, make a call. He has to utilize a core law of combat known as prioritize and execute.
But, I mean, it's easy to read the word relax in a book. It's incredibly counterintuitive to actually do it when you're staring down the barrel of a rocket-propelled grenade. How do you actually bypass that biological panic response?
You do it through aggressive detachment. You have to mentally step back from the chaos. If Leif tries to process the entire overwhelming scenario at once, he will freeze.
Right, analysis paralysis.
Exactly.
Okay.
If he worries about calling the base on the radio, he's taking his hands off his weapon. If he tries to search the prisoner, those heavily armed men are going to kill him.
Yeah, the priorities become crystal clear.
The absolute highest, most immediate mortal threat to his survival and the survival of the EOD tech is the enemy force bearing down on them. He has to detach from the peripheral problems, prioritize that single greatest threat, and execute a solution violently and immediately.
And according to the text, he executes it flawlessly. Without a second of hesitation, Leif evaluates the group of fighters and engages the most dangerous weapon in the cluster first, the guy holding the RPG.
The biggest threat in the room.
Right. He fires his M4 rifle, hitting the RPG gunner dead center. As that fighter drops, Leif doesn't pause. He rapidly shifts his fire to the next threat and the next.
Which completely changes the dynamic.
It does. The sudden, aggressive, accurate response completely shocks the enemy fighters. They were expecting to ambush isolated Americans, not walk into a buzzsaw. They panic and retreat back around the corner, dragging their wounded.
But Leif knows his 5.56mm rounds don't have enough knockdown power to keep a larger force at bay forever.
Right. It's just a temporary fix.
Yes. The insurgents are going to regroup, realize there are only 2 Americans, and push back hard.
So now the environment has changed, which means the priorities must immediately shift.
Exactly. The law of combat is dynamic. The immediate threat of being overrun is temporarily checked. The new highest priority is getting back to the safety of the main SEAL assault force.
But they can't just turn their backs and sprint, or they will be shot in the back the moment the insurgents peek around that corner.
No, they have to use another fundamental combat tactic. Cover and move. This is the absolute essence of teamwork in a combat zone.
The choreography of this is incredible. Leif keeps his rifle trained down the alley, providing covering fire, or at least the threat of it, while the EOD tech bounds backward, dragging the prisoner.
Yeah, it's leapfrogging.
Right. Then, the EOD tech stops, raises his weapon to cover the alley, while Leif bounds backward. They leapfrog their way down the alleyway in this coordinated, alternating movement until they reach the cover of a solid concrete wall.
And that's when they can finally take a breath.
Yes, quickly search the prisoner to confirm he has no weapons, and ultimately link back up with their unit to resume command of the larger operation.
The overarching lesson Leif took from surviving that alleyway wasn't just about marksmanship or physical conditioning.
Yeah.
It was that the principles of leadership, specifically prioritize and execute and cover and move, are what allow you to dominate a chaotic situation rather than be dominated by it.
It's all about leadership.
It is. Leadership is the single most important factor on any battlefield. Effective leaders lead successful teams that accomplish their mission and win. Ineffective leaders do not. It is that stark and it is that binary.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? When you are sitting at your desk on a Tuesday, and you are suddenly hit by a tidal wave of urgent crises, Let's say 3 massive client accounts are threatening to leave. A critical project timeline just collapsed due to a software glitch, a key supplier just went bankrupt, and your kid's school is calling you at the exact same time.
Standard Tuesday for a lot of people.
Right. You cannot tackle them all simultaneously. If you try to frantically draft an email while answering the phone while trying to fix the software, you will fail at all of them.
You'll just make it worse.
Exactly. The lesson from the alleyway is that you have to take a breath, detach, relax, look around, make a call. You must evaluate the board, prioritize the single most immediate threat to your current mission, execute on it until it is stabilized, and only then move down the list to the next priority.
And implementing that kind of clarity requires a very specific psychological foundation.
Yeah.
You cannot prioritize effectively if you are busy pointing fingers or making excuses about why the problems exist in the first place.
Which brings us to the very bedrock of this entire philosophy.
Yes. We need to talk about the concept of extreme ownership. To truly understand the gravity of this, we have to look at one of the most difficult, gut-wrenching scenarios presented in the text.
This scene is incredibly heavy. It takes place in the Malab district of Ramadi. It's early morning, and the literal fog of war is thick in the air.
The insurgents have set tires on fire in the streets to obscure visibility.
Yeah, so there is black soot hanging over everything. U.S. tanks and armored Humvees have kicked up massive clouds of dust, and heavy machine gun fire has pulverized the concrete buildings into a fine powder that coats the entire neighborhood.
A completely chaotic environment.
Jocko Willink, the task unit commander, is arriving on the scene in an armored Humvee. Through this smoky, chaotic haze, he sees a massive U.S. M1A2 Abrams tank sitting right in the middle of the road. Its huge 120mm main gun is pointed at point-blank range directly at a building.
And to make the situation even more intense, there's a red smoke grenade deployed near that building.
Which is bad.
Yes, it's the universal military signal for a friendly unit in dire need of immediate help. The figurative fog of war, the confusion, the broken radio communications, the inaccurate, rapidly changing information is even thicker than the physical smoke in the air.
So Jocko is the commander, meaning he has various elements scattered all over this hotly contested, hostile neighborhood. He gets out of his Humvee and sprints over to a U.S. Marine Anglico gunnery sergeant.
And for context, Anglico stands for Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. Think of them as the ultimate battlefield coordinators. Their entire job is to direct devastating heavy firepower from artillery, tanks, and aircraft onto enemy targets.
The Marine gunny is absolutely fired up. He tells Jocko there are hardcore insurgents in that specific building putting up a massive organized fight.
He says these insurgents just killed an Iraqi soldier who tried to enter the compound.
Right, and the gunny is currently on the radio coordinating an airstrike to drop bombs on the building and wipe the enemy out entirely. If the bombs don't get there first, the Abrams tank is getting ready to level the place with its main gun.
But this is where Jocko's situational awareness and detachment save lives. He doesn't just blindly agree with the gunny. He mentally steps back and looks at the broader operational map in his head.
Because he knows where his guys are supposed to be.
Exactly. He knows exactly where his SEAL sniper teams are supposed to be. He knows that one of those teams had to relocate in the middle of the night because their original position was compromised, and their new updated position should be very close to the building the tank is currently targeting.
Wow, that's a chilling realization.
Furthermore, Jocko knows the patrol schedules, and he knows that no friendly Iraqi soldiers were supposed to be anywhere near this specific sector for at least another couple of hours.
The pieces of the puzzle just are conflicting. Things aren't adding up.
No, they're not. So Jocko tells the gunny to hold his fire immediately. He then bravely walks across the open street, steps through the gate of this bullet-riddled compound, kicks the door open, and finds himself staring face-to-face with one of his own SEAL platoon chiefs.
It's the ultimate nightmare scenario for any military leader. Jocko looks at the chief, processes the horror of what just happened, and says, it was a blue on blue.
Friendly fire. Fratricide.
Yeah.
It is universally considered the absolute worst thing that can happen in combat.
The chain of events that led to this moment was incredibly chaotic, but tragically simple in hindsight.
Very true.
In the early morning darkness, a rogue element of Iraqi soldiers strayed completely outside of their assigned operational boundaries. They crept into the exact compound where the SEAL snipers had secretly relocated.
The SEALs, who were expecting only hostile enemy fighters in this specific sector, saw armed silhouettes creeping into their building and engaged the threat.
And the Iraqi soldiers outside, suddenly taking fire, returned fire. Marines and army troops in the vicinity, hearing the massive gunfight and seeing their Iraqi allies getting shot at, unleashed a ferocious barrage of heavy-caliber weapons into the building, logically assuming it was full of terrorists.
A deadly feedback loop.
Exactly. The SEALs trapped inside the building, now pinned down by devastating .50 caliber machine gun fire from their own forces, thought they were under a massive coordinated insurgent attack and called in the heavy tanks for support. It was just a massive misidentification.
The aftermath of this confusion is horrific.
Yeah. One allied Iraqi soldier is dead, several others are wounded, and one of Jocko's own SEALs has been wounded. He was fragged in the face.
For those who might not know the term, being fragged means he was hit by fragmentation or shrapnel from an explosive or a weapon impact.
Back at the base, the adrenaline wears off and the crushing reality sets in. Jocko writes that he wants to die. He feels physically sick to his stomach, and almost immediately, the massive military bureaucracy descends.
They demand answers.
Of course they do. His commanding officer, the command master chief, and an investigating officer are flying in from outside the city to conduct a formal inquiry, find out exactly who screwed up, and likely end their careers.
Jocko is ordered to prepare a comprehensive debrief for the investigating brass. He sits down and builds a PowerPoint presentation detailing every single point of failure that led to the tragedy. And as you can imagine, in a complex operation, there were many.
Like the Iraqi army changing their patrol plan and not communicating it.
Right. The overall communication plan was ambiguous and failed under pressure. The SEAL snipers hadn't clearly passed up the exact coordinates of their newly relocated position. The specific SEAL who fired the very first shot in the dark hadn't positively identified his target as an enemy before pulling the trigger.
Just failure after failure.
Exactly. As Jocko looks at this long list of distinct individual failures, he realizes something fundamental is missing. He keeps staring at the slide, asking himself, who is ultimately to blame for this?
The tension in that debrief room must have been absolutely suffocating. You have the commanding officer sitting in the front row, stern and waiting for answers. The wounded SEAL is literally sitting there with his face covered in bandages.
It's brutal.
Jocko stands up in front of his men and the investigating officers and asks the room, whose fault was this? And his men, because they are honorable guys, immediately try to fall on their swords.
The shooter raises his hand and says it's his fault for not positively identifying the target in the dark.
The radio man speaks up and says it's his fault for not ensuring the new coordinates were received by headquarters. The SEAL advisor to the Iraqi army says it's his fault for not physically controlling the movements of the Iraqi soldiers.
But Jocko stops them. This is the defining moment of the entire philosophy. He looks at his men and tells them they are all wrong. He says there is only one person to blame for this tragedy, and it is him.
Wow.
As the task unit commander, the senior leader on the ground, he is wholly and completely responsible for everything that happens in Task Unit Bruiser. He owns the entire operation.
Because if the overall plan was ambiguous, it was his fault for not making it crystal clear.
Exactly. If the Iraqi soldiers weren't controlled, it was his fault for not ensuring the advisors understood their physical boundaries. If the snipers didn't communicate their position, it was his fault for not establishing a fail-proof communication protocol. He drops his ego entirely, strips away every valid excuse, and takes 100% of the blame onto his own shoulders.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly where my mind immediately jumps to the corporate world. If you are sitting in a boardroom and a major project collapses, costing the company millions of dollars, and you stand up in front of the CEO and say, I am the sole reason this failed, it is entirely my fault. The standard operating procedure in most corporate cultures is that HR writes you up, you are put on a performance improvement plan, or you are fired on the spot.
That's the reality most people face.
Right. So why didn't Jocko's commanding officer just relieve him of command and end his career right then and there?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it gets to the heart of why extreme ownership is so powerful, yet so rare. Taking complete ownership actually increased the trust his superiors had in him.
Which feels completely backward.
It does, but think about it. Because the commanding officer, assuming he is a competent leader himself, knows that complex operations have multiple points of failure. He knows the radio man made a mistake. He knows the Iraqi army went rogue. But when Jocko refused to point fingers, when he refused to throw his subordinates under the bus to protect his own reputation and career, he proved something invaluable.
He proved he cared more about the mission than himself.
Exactly. He proved that he was entirely focused on the mission and on fixing the root operational problems, so that a tragedy like this would never happen again. If Jocko had blamed the radio man, the debrief would have ended with firing the radio man. But the underlying communication systems would remain broken.
That makes perfect sense.
When a leader takes extreme ownership, it instantly neutralizes the toxic culture of blame and defensiveness. It creates a psychological safe space that allows the entire team to look objectively at the reality of their failures, dissect them, and systematically improve.
What's wild is that you see this exact same defensive reflex in completely air-conditioned, safe environments. The book actually brings up a perfect parallel. Jocko, after leaving the military, is consulting for a manufacturing company.
A very different kind of battlefield.
Very different. They have a vice president of manufacturing who recently rolled out a massive new consolidation and bonus plan. But the plan is completely failing. Production is down, morale is down, and the board of directors is demanding to know why. And the VP, unlike Jocko in that debrief room, has a million excuses ready to go.
The VP has constructed an impenetrable fortress of blame. He blames the distribution managers, saying they're too stuck in their ways and afraid of losing face-to-face contact with the individual plants.
He blames the plant managers and the sales team, arguing that they are pushing back on the new bonus structure because they are terrified of losing their key staff.
He blames the broader economic market. He blames the implementation of new technology. He looks in every single direction except the mirror. He blames everybody but himself.
Jocko sits down with his VP, listens to this laundry list of complaints, and delivers an incredibly hard truth. He looks at the VP and says, "You are the reason the plan is failing."
And predictably, the VP gets incredibly defensive.
Of course. He argues, look, I came up with a brilliant plan, but I can't physically make the employees execute it.
And Jocko replies with a piece of coaching that should be framed in every manager's office. You can't make people execute? You have to lead them.
So simple, but so profound.
It is a profound distinction. Management is about manipulating resources. Leadership is about inspiring human beings. If the distribution managers do not support the plan, it is because the VP has failed to clearly explain the strategic vision and why it is necessary.
If the plant managers are aggressively pushing back, it is because the VP has failed to address their legitimate concerns or communicate the long-term benefits effectively.
The leader bears absolute, full responsibility for explaining the mission and securing the genuine buy-in of the team. If the team fails to execute, the leader has fundamentally failed to lead.
Jocko preps this VP for his upcoming board meeting. He tells the VP he has to walk in there, completely drop his ego, and tell the board that the failure of the rollout is his fault because he failed to effectively communicate and lead his team through the transition.
A terrifying moment for that VP.
Oh, absolutely. And just like with Jocko's military commanding officer, the board is absolutely stunned, but incredibly impressed. They were fully expecting him to walk in with a slide deck full of excuses and finger-pointing.
When he takes accountability, it instantly earns their respect. It diffuses their anger, and it fundamentally changes the entire dynamic of the company, from a culture of blame to a culture of solutions.
So what does this all mean for you? We have to acknowledge that taking ownership when things go catastrophically wrong requires extraordinary courage. Human nature is biologically wired for self-preservation.
As individuals, our ego dictates that we proudly attribute our successes to our own hard work, our own brilliance, and our own grit. But when we fail, that same ego scrambles to protect our self-image by blaming bad luck, unfair circumstances, or the incompetence of other people.
Extreme ownership demands that you violently override that biological reflex. You have to stop protecting your ego and start protecting your mission. It's a trap any of us can fall into. Think about a project that is currently derailing at work, or a dynamic at home that just isn't functioning.
Right.
When you analyze why it's failing, are you looking out the window? Are you pointing your finger at the market, your boss, your spouse, the state of the economy, or the unrealistic timeline? Because as long as you are looking out the window, you are powerless. You are a victim of circumstance.
If you actually want to fix the problem and regain control of your life, you have to stop looking out the window and start looking in the mirror. Own the failure, fix the root cause, move forward.
That realization leads us perfectly into the next critical principle. If you genuinely adopt a mindset of extreme ownership, it fundamentally rewires how you view the people working under you. Which brings us to a harsh, often unpopular, but undeniable truth. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders.
That is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of managers.
It really is. To illustrate this, the source text takes us far away from the dust of Ramadi, back to Coronado, California, to the absolute, highly engineered agony of BUDS Hell Week.
The famous SEAL screening process.
Yes, this is the grueling screening and selection process for Navy SEALs, and it is explicitly designed to push human beings far past their perceived physical and mental breaking points. We are dropped into night 3 of Hell Week.
Night 3 is usually when the hallucinations start.
Oh, yeah. The students are freezing cold, soaking wet from the Pacific Ocean, and covered head to toe in coarse sand that chafes their skin until it literally bleeds. They have slept for less than 1 single hour in the last 72 hours of continuous physical punishment.
It is vital to understand that Hell Week is primarily a test of mental fortitude and team dynamics, not just raw physical fitness. The class is divided into boat crews of 7 men, organized strictly by height to ensure the weight of the boat is distributed somewhat evenly.
Each crew is assigned a 200-pound inflatable rebel boat, an IBS or inflatable boat, small. They have to carry this boat on their heads everywhere they go.
Which is brutal on the neck and spine.
They paddle it for miles through crashing, freezing surf. They carry it over massive sand berms, and they run with it down the beach. Because they are sorted by height, the shortest guys in the class are all grouped together. They are affectionately, or perhaps sadistically, known as the Smurf crew.
And they even have to paint a bright blue Smurf on the front of their rubber boat.
The psychological pressure is immense because every single evolution in BUDS is a race. The instructors constantly yell, "It pays to be a winner." And it really does, because the winning boat crew gets to sit down, maybe get close to a fire, and rest for a few precious minutes while every other losing crew is ordered back into the freezing water or forced to do grueling flutter kicks in the sand.
The text highlights an incredibly stark contrast between two specific crews. On one hand, you have Boat Crew 2000. They are absolutely dominating the class. They are winning almost every single race.
When you watch them, they are working in perfect unison, compensating for each other's physical weaknesses. And despite the unimaginable misery they are in, they are actually smiling and encouraging each other.
On the completely opposite end of the spectrum is Boat Crew for 6th. They are coming in dead last in virtually every single race. But what the instructors are watching isn't just that they are losing, it's how they are losing.
They have completely broken down as a team.
Exactly. They are operating as selfish individuals in survival mode. They are openly cursing at each other, screaming that the guy in front isn't pulling his weight, blaming each other for not paddling hard enough.
Their boat crew leader is essentially indifferent. He has adopted a victim mentality, acting as if the instructors intentionally dealt him a bad hand of weak, unmotivated losers. And because they are constantly losing and showing poor teamwork, the instructors are swarming them like sharks.
They punish them with extra bear crawls, extended overhead arm carries with the boat, effectively multiplying their agony tenfold and creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure.
So reading this, a skeptic might say, well, maybe Boat Crew 6 really was just physically weaker. Maybe they got the guys who just didn't have the muscle mass or the endurance.
A logical assumption.
But a highly respected instructor, a towering veteran SEAL senior chief, decides to run a psychological experiment that completely shatters that excuse. He blows his whistle, stops the races, and announces that they are going to swap the boat crew leaders.
This is a brilliant intervention.
The highly effective leader of the dominant Boat Crew 6 is ordered to take over the failing, miserable Boat Crew 6. And the defeated, complaining leader of Boat Crew 6 is handed the keys to the winning Boat Crew 6.
The psychology of this moment is brilliant. You can easily imagine what is going through the heads of these two leaders. The original leader of Boat Crew 6 is likely secretly thrilled. He thinks he just won the lottery.
He genuinely believes his previous failure was entirely the fault of his terrible crew. And now he's been handed a team of thoroughbreds. He thinks he's got a free ride to the winner's circle.
While the leader of Boat Crew 2 is likely incredibly frustrated to lose the well-oiled machine he built. But as a true leader, he accepts the challenge without complaint.
The instructors blow the whistle, and the very next race begins. The crews heave the boats onto their heads, sprint over the sand berms, crash through the freezing surf, paddle furiously around the distant markers, and head back toward the finish line on the beach.
And the result of this race is absolutely shocking to anyone who believes that talent is the only variable.
Boat Crew the Six, the exact same six guys who had been dead last, the team of supposed losers who couldn't do anything right, crosses the finish line first. They win. They go from worst to first in a single race, simply by changing one single variable, the leader.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanics of that turnaround.
Yeah.
How did one person change the physical output of six exhausted, broken men in a matter of minutes?
He didn't magically give them new muscles.
No, he didn't. What he did was fundamentally change their culture. He immediately refused to accept their excuses. He did not tolerate their infighting or their bickering. Instead of letting them focus inward on their individual pain, their bleeding chafing, and their misery, he focused them entirely outward onto the mission.
He broke the overwhelming, impossible misery of Hell Week down into immediate, achievable micro goals. He didn't say, we have to survive the week. He said, just get the boat over this next wave. Just paddle in unison to that next buoy.
The text highlights a profoundly important leadership maxim here. It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. When the old leader of Boat Crew the Six accepted their substandard performance, when he allowed them to curse at each other, that behavior became the new accepted standard of the team.
The new leader arrived and simply refused to tolerate anything less than excellence and unity. And the team, realizing excuses were no longer valid currency, rose to meet that new expectation.
And what's incredibly telling is that Boat Crew the Second, the winning team that received the bad leader, still performed exceptionally well and came in a very close second.
Because their previous leader had instilled such a strong, lasting culture of extreme ownership and high standards that the team practically ran itself, even when he was removed.
It's a phenomenal story from the training pipelines. But the author, Leif Babin, quickly pivots to remind the reader of the crushing reality of actual combat. He notes that he reflects on this BUDS lesson while carrying the immense permanent burden of having lost SEAL teammates under his command in Ramadi.
Extraordinary men like Mark Lee, Mike Mansour, and Ryan Job.
He emphasizes this to ground the theory. Leadership is not just an interesting theoretical concept for a management seminar. In their world, the quality of leadership dictates who returns home to their families and who comes back in a flag-draped transfer case. If a leader in a combat zone lazily accepts the excuse that their team is just bad, people die.
Let's bring this powerful concept into the business application provided in the text. The authors consult for a company that has a chief technology officer whose major new product rollout is an absolute, unmitigated financial and operational disaster.
When confronted by the CEO and the consultants, this CTO acts like what the authors perfectly describe as a tortured genius.
The tortured genius, it's such a great term.
It is a fascinating and highly destructive corporate archetype. This is a highly intelligent person who absolutely refuses to accept any responsibility for their failures. In their mind, their vision is flawless, their decisions are perfect, but the rest of the world is simply too incompetent to appreciate their brilliance.
When asked why the rollout failed, this CTO has a shield of excuses. He blames the challenging economic market. He complains that his engineering staff is too inexperienced. He blames poor communication from the sales team for not selling it right, and he even subtly blames the CEO for not providing enough budget. He takes zero ownership.
Because he refuses to adopt extreme ownership, because he truly believes he has a bad team and that he's a victim of their incompetence, the CEO realizes a hard truth. Performance will never, ever improve under his leadership.
You cannot fix a problem you refuse to acknowledge.
Exactly. So the CEO makes the tough, necessary call to fire him. They bring in a new CTO. And this new CTO immediately embraces extreme ownership. He stops blaming the engineering staff and starts mentoring them. He stops fighting with the sales team and starts collaborating with them to understand what the customers actually want.
The corporate silos break down, the departments start working together, and the company completely rebounds.
This raises an important question for anyone leading a group of people. The fired CTO failed because he fundamentally believed he was burdened with a bad team. But as the BUDS boat crew experiment proved definitively, there are no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Right. It's an uncomfortable mirror to look into. When your team at work consistently misses deadlines or your volunteer committee is completely disorganized, it is incredibly tempting to throw your hands up and complain about their incompetence.
But as long as you make excuses, you'll be stuck in last place, getting punished by the surf, just like Boat Crew the Sixth. You have to take charge, dictate the culture, and lead your team to victory.
And leading a team to victory requires absolute, unwavering commitment, which brings us perfectly to the next core principle outlined in the text. Believe. A leader cannot effectively force a team to execute a difficult plan if the leader themselves does not fundamentally believe in the overarching mission.
To set this up, the text outlines a massive, incredibly frustrating hurdle that Task Unit Bruiser faced during their deployment in Ramadi. They receive orders from higher headquarters, the brass sitting safely outside the city, that they must conduct all of their combat operations by, with, and through Iraqi security forces.
Simply put, they are ordered to take conventional Iraqi soldiers, known locally as Jundis, out on their highly dangerous combat missions.
To truly understand the level of resistance to this order, you have to understand the vast, almost comical capability gap between these two forces. On one hand, you have U.S. Navy SEALs. They are elite, highly selected, meticulously trained, perfectly synchronized operators.
They are equipped with the absolute best gear, advanced night vision, and encrypted communications equipment on the planet. Most importantly, they trust each other implicitly with their lives.
And on the other hand, the Iraqi Jundis they are ordered to operate with are the exact opposite. They are poorly equipped. The text notes some were literally showing up for combat wearing sandals and carrying rusted, illegally copied AK-47s that were so worn out they couldn't even be aimed properly.
That's just wild. They have almost no formal tactical training. Many are physically weak, and worst of all, in a city teeming with insurgents, their loyalties are highly questionable.
Right, many of these soldiers revere local insurgent clerics. There are constant legitimate fears among the Americans that these Iraqi troops might turn their weapons on the SEALs in the middle of a firefight.
So when the SEALs are told they have to bring these untrained, unpredictable, potentially treacherous soldiers into the deadliest urban combat zone on Earth, their reaction is furious. Honestly, reading it, I'd be furious too. You're elite, and you're told to babysit guys who might accidentally or intentionally shoot you. They are absolutely livid.
The frustration is completely valid at a tactical level. Even Jocko's initial internal reaction when he receives the order is, hell no, it's absolutely not worth the risk to my men.
But Jocko realizes a fundamental truth about leadership and human nature. If he goes into the team room to his men and says, look, guys, the generals gave us this stupid order. I hate it, you hate it, it's dangerous, but we just have to shut up and do it anyway, the mission will inherently fail.
A leader cannot execute an order they don't believe in, and they certainly cannot inspire their troops to execute it with any level of competence or aggression. Jocko knows he has to stop, detach from his immediate tactical frustration and his protective instincts over his men, and look at the broader strategic picture.
He has to ask the most important, often most difficult question in leadership. Why? Why is the chain of command asking us to do this?
He steps back and figures out the strategic logic. He realizes that if the Iraqi military can never learn to secure their own country, the U.S. military will be stuck bleeding in the streets of Iraq for generations. It won't just be his men dying, it will be their sons, and eventually their grandsons, fighting in Ramadi.
He acknowledges reality. They can't magically wave a wand and make the Iraqi soldiers into elite SEALs, but they can make them good enough to handle basic neighborhood security.
And the only way to make them good enough is for the SEALs to take them out into actual combat, train them under fire on the job, and systematically crush the insurgency alongside them to lower the violence to a level the local police can manage.
Furthermore, there is a pragmatic reality. Bringing Iraqi troops is the political prerequisite. It is the only way higher command will approve the SEALs' combat missions, allowing them to go out and take the fight to the enemy.
Once Jocko works through this logic, once he truly understands and internalizes the strategic why, his belief in the necessity of the mission becomes absolute. He isn't just following orders anymore. He is executing a strategy he believes in.
But belief at the top isn't enough. He then has to systematically pass that belief down the chain of command to the men who actually have to risk their lives executing it.
He calls his SEALs into the briefing room. As expected, they are grumbling, crossing their arms, and cursing the brass. Jocko doesn't just stand at a podium and bark an authoritative order at them. He uses a Socratic approach. He looks at his men and asks them a direct question. If the Iraqi military can't eventually handle the security in this country, who is going to do it?
The room goes dead silent because every single hardened operator in that room knows the answer. We are. They realize that if they don't train the Iraqis, the Americans are never going home.
Once Jocko takes the time to explain the strategic why, the SEALs understand it. They don't have to love the Jundis, and they certainly don't have to like the added risk, but they believe in the absolute necessity of the mission.
And because they believe, they execute with incredible self-sacrificing valor. The text mentions a later operation where these same SEALs who initially hated the idea of working with the Iraqis, literally run through a hailstorm of enemy machine gun fire in an open, exposed street to rescue a wounded Iraqi soldier who had been abandoned by his own comrades.
That level of heroism simply does not happen unless the troops deeply believe in the mission.
Let's translate this psychology to the corporate scenario provided in the text. It perfectly illustrates how a lack of belief paralyzes a company. A corporation introduces a brand new sales compensation plan.
The mechanics of the plan essentially cut the take-home pay for low-producing salespeople while heavily rewarding top performers.
But mid-level managers who have to implement this plan are extremely unhappy. They complain constantly behind closed doors. They think it's a terrible, punitive idea that is going to destroy morale and drive their staff straight into the arms of their competitors.
Jocko is brought in to consult, and he sits down with these frustrated managers. He asks them a very simple question. Why is the company doing this?
And the managers sheepishly admit that they actually have no idea. They don't know the financial strategy behind it. But what's more concerning is that they admit they are too intimidated by their highly experienced, very intense CEO to knock on her door and ask. They are afraid of looking stupid or insubordinate.
This raises an important question about corporate culture and psychological safety. Reverence for a boss or fear of their authority can fatally stifle communication. The CEO in this scenario just assumed her managers understood her brilliant financial strategy because they never raised their hands to ask questions.
She proudly claimed she had an open-door policy, but she failed to realize that the power dynamic and her intense personality made the managers too afraid to ever walk through that door.
Jocko goes to the CEO and explains the reality of the situation. He tells her that her managers are failing to implement the plan, not because they are defiant, but because they simply do not believe in it. And they don't believe in it because they don't understand the why.
To her credit, the CEO takes ownership. She comes down to the training room, stands in front of the managers, and clearly explains the broader strategy. Yes, the new plan punishes low producers, which is hard. But by doing so, it significantly cuts the company's overall overhead costs.
With that lower overhead, the company can afford to lower the price of their products. Those lower prices will give the top-producing salespeople a massive competitive advantage, allowing them to capture significantly more market share, which ultimately increases the total volume, raises profits, and secures the future of the company for everyone.
Suddenly, the light bulb goes on for the managers. The strategy makes perfect logical sense. They instantly get it. They understand the why, which means they can now genuinely believe in the necessity of the plan.
And because their belief is real, they can leave that room and confidently, authentically explain it to their sales teams, rather than just saying, corporate is making us do this.
The takeaway here is profound. If you are a leader, you owe your team the why. But conversely, if your boss gives you a task or a new directive that you think is ridiculous, counterproductive, or just confusing, you must have the courage to ask why up the chain of command. Don't just sit at your desk and grumble to your coworkers. You cannot effectively lead your own team to execute a plan if you don't truly believe in the mission yourself. Ask questions until it makes sense.
And we have to recognize that asking those questions, raising your hand, and admitting that you don't understand something requires you to suppress your own pride. It requires you to admit you don't know everything. This bridges us perfectly to the fourth principle in the text, which is arguably the most difficult to master. Check the ego.
Ego is the ultimate saboteur of human performance. It clouds our judgment, it prevents us from taking good advice, it makes us aggressively defensive, and it absolutely ruins teamwork. To set the scene on the destructive power of ego, we are brought to Camp Corregidor in Ramadi.
It is a chaotic, incredibly dangerous forward operating base located right in the heart of enemy territory.
The text describes the SEALs arriving at the base for the first time, and almost immediately the base comes under attack. The SEALs are literally running to the rooftop in flip-flops and body armor to fire heavy machine guns at attacking insurgents. A brand new SEAL unloads 2 full belts of ammunition, turns to his teammate, and laughs, realizing that this deployment is going to be a whole different, terrifying level of war. It is a sobering wake-up call to the extreme violence of the city.
Camp Corregidor is run by the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division, specifically the 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment. For history buffs, this is the legendary Band of Brothers Regiment from World War II.
They are currently commanded by an exceptional, highly experienced lieutenant colonel who demands strict, unwavering discipline from his troops. He mandates clean shaves, proper uniforms at all times, weapons always cleaned and ready, and strict adherence to protocol.
To an outsider, it might seem like petty micromanagement, but this discipline is exactly what keeps his soldiers alive in a place where a momentary lapse of focus means death by a mortar strike or sniper fire.
The SEALs from Task Unit Bruiser arrive at the base to work alongside the 1506th. Now, Navy SEALs are often stereotypically known for having very relaxed grooming standards. They are famous for their long hair, operators' beards, and modifying their gear. But the SEALs instantly check their egos.
To show profound respect for the combat-hardened Army soldiers who have been bleeding in this city for months, the SEALs voluntarily adopt the Army's strict standards. They cut their hair into high and tight military fades, they shave their faces every single day, and they even choose to wear Army camouflage uniforms instead of their SEAL gear.
It is a massive display of humility, and it builds an instant, unbreakable bond of mutual respect and trust between the two units. But the text brilliantly contrasts this with the arrival of another unit.
A new, highly capable unit arrives at Camp Corregidor. They are U.S. military advisors working with a supposedly elite, well-equipped unit of Iraqi troops. Unlike the Bruiser SEALs, this new unit arrives with massive, unchecked egos.
They swagger onto the base with long hair, dirty, non-standard baseball caps, and mismatched, sloppy uniforms, blatantly ignoring the base commander's published standards. But the grooming violations are just a visual symptom of the real underlying disease.
The real disease is their sheer arrogance. They talk down to the conventional Army veterans who have actually been fighting and dying in Ramadi. When the SEALs try to pull them aside and offer life-saving advice about the specific dangers of the local streets, like where the sniper alleys are, or how the insurgents use complex ambushes, the advisors brush them off, basically saying, "We've got this, we're elite."
And worst of all, they absolutely refuse to share their operational plans with the base commander. In an urban environment where multiple friendly units are moving around in the dark and calling in heavy artillery and airstrikes, coordination isn't just a courtesy, it is literally life or death.
It creates a terrifying situation. When the Army operations officer asks for their patrol plan, the new unit's leader arrogantly tells him, "We'll tell you later on a need-to-know basis." When the Army demands to know their patrol locations so they don't accidentally shoot them or call artillery down on their heads, the advisors provide a 4-digit grid square.
To explain that in civilian terms, a 4-digit grid square basically says, we are somewhere inside this 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer box. In a dense city filled with thousands of buildings, that is completely useless information. They could be anywhere.
Their ego creates an unacceptable tactical nightmare. The Army colonel, realizing that this rogue, uncooperative unit is a massive liability that is going to get his own men killed in a friendly fire incident, makes a hard call. He kicks them off the base. He bans them from operating in his sector.
Think about the tragedy of that. Despite all their elite training, millions of dollars of gear, and potential capability, their ego literally benches them. They are excluded from participating in the historic Battle of Ramadi. They achieved absolutely nothing simply because their arrogance destroyed their ability to cooperate with the team.
We see this exact destructive dynamic play out in the corporate case study provided by the authors. They're consulting for an energy company, and they sit down with a mid-level manager named Gary. Gary is absolutely furious.
He calls the consultants into his office because his highly experienced drilling superintendent out in the field swapped out a critical piece of drilling equipment without getting Gary's explicit permission. This action violated the company's standard operating procedures. It caused a major malfunction that set the project back several days, and it ultimately cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost downtime.
Gary's ego is incredibly bruised. He feels his authority has been challenged. He tells the consultants he wants to call the superintendent into his office, read him the riot act, yell at him for insubordination, and formally write him up.
But the consultants hit the brakes. They make Gary analyze the situation objectively. They ask him, did the superintendent sabotage the company on purpose? Is he a malicious employee? Gary admits no, he's actually one of their hardest workers. The reality is that the superintendent made a tactical call in the field to try and speed things up because he didn't fully understand the larger strategic financial implications of breaking that specific procedure.
The consultants advise Gary that he is about to make a massive leadership error. He must check his own ego. If he attacks the superintendent and yells at him, it will instantly become a clash of egos. The superintendent will get defensive, communication will completely shut down, and the superintendent might just quit, taking his decades of valuable, hard-to-replace expertise straight to a competitor.
Instead, Gary's advised to use extreme ownership. He has to swallow his pride, approach the superintendent, and say, I failed you. I failed to clearly communicate the exact parameters of this project, and I failed to explain why this specific procedure is so critically important to our bottom line. It's my fault.
Now, Gary pushes back initially, arguing, but he's the one who broke the rules. Why should I apologize? But the consultants explain the psychology. By taking the blame, Gary completely defuses the superintendent's natural defensiveness. He removes the threat.
And exactly as predicted, when Gary takes the blame, it allows the superintendent to safely drop his own ego, recognize his procedural mistake, apologize for overstepping, and then eagerly work with Gary to fix the breakdown in the system.
So to the listener, I want you to honestly reflect on where your ego is causing friction in your life right now. Are you holding on to a petty grudge at work because someone didn't see you on an email and you felt disrespected? Are you engaged in a bitter argument with your spouse because you want to prove that you are right more than you actually want to resolve the issue and be happy? Ego is a wall. I challenge you to try checking it.
The next time there is a conflict or a miscommunication, try taking the blame. Just say, I probably didn't explain that well, or I should have checked in with you. Watch how incredibly quickly it disarms the other person, lowers their defenses, and opens the door for real, constructive solutions.
That brings us to our final principle, which really ties everything we've discussed today together into a cohesive strategy. It is the most fundamental tactical rule of combat, and arguably of business. Cover and move.
Cover and move is the military translation of pure teamwork. It means that all individual elements within the greater team, whether those are infantry squads or corporate departments, must mutually support each other to accomplish the overarching strategic mission. You absolutely cannot operate in isolated silos. If you try to move without cover, you die.
We go back to the violent, chaotic streets of south-central Ramadi for one final, intense operation. The Army is executing a massive clearance operation using a seize, clear, hold, build strategy, literally fighting house to house, block by block, to root out the insurgents.
Leif Babin is leading a SEAL sniper overwatch team known as OP2. Their job is to deeply embed themselves in enemy territory ahead of the main force to provide sniper cover and protect the Army troops clearing the buildings. They infiltrate a building in the dead of night, but as dawn breaks, they realize it is a terrible position. It is highly vulnerable, exposed on multiple sides, and offers poor visibility.
As the sun comes up, the enemy realizes they are there and starts probing their position. Snipers start taking pot shots at the windows, and soon insurgents start firing belt-fed machine guns at the walls. To make matters infinitely worse, the main U.S. clearance force finishes their sweep of the immediate area and heads back to the safety of the base. OP2 is suddenly left hanging out in the wind, isolated a mile deep into hostile, insurgent-controlled territory.
Leif, as the leader, is faced with a horrible tactical dilemma with no good options. Option 1, stay in the vulnerable building, hope to hide until nightfall, and very likely face a massive, coordinated insurgent attack that could easily overrun their small squad. Option 2, get on the radio and call for armored Bradley fighting vehicles to drive out and extract them. But that takes time. The noise of the tracks announces their exact position to the whole city, and it risks the Bradleys hitting deadly, massive IEDs on the uncleared roads. Option 3, break out of the building immediately and foot patrol back to base in broad daylight, risking an ambush in the maze of streets.
Applying prioritize and execute, he chooses what he calculates to be the least bad option, the immediate foot patrol. He wants to rely on speed and surprise. But in the stress, adrenaline, and extreme urgency of the moment, Leif makes a critical, near-fatal error in his planning. He focuses entirely inward on his own small OP2 squad. He is so worried about his immediate guys that he completely fails to coordinate his movement with the other SEAL sniper team, OP1, which was positioned in a different building much closer to the base. OP1 could have stayed in place and provided sniper overwatch for OP2 as they moved through the streets.
Because there is no communication, OP1 assumes the operation is winding down, leaves their building early, and casually walks back to base. Meanwhile, Leif and OP2 emerge from their building into the trash-filled, dangerous streets. They use cover and move internally within their own small squad, one half of the squad aiming their weapons down the alleys while the other half runs forward, leapfrogging down the streets. But because Leif didn't coordinate with OP1, they have no overarching protection. They're blind to the larger battlefield. And sure enough, halfway back to the base, all hell breaks loose.
A massive insurgent ambush hits them from behind. The enemy opens up with AK-47s and belt-fed machine guns from elevated positions. Bullets are literally smashing into the concrete at their feet, spraying them with chips of rock. The text makes it clear. It is an absolute miracle they aren't completely wiped out in the kill zone. Through sheer violent aggression, executing a flawless center peel maneuver, which, for those who don't know, is an organized tactical retreat where the front shooters fire, peel to the back of the formation, and the next line fires, creating a continuous unbroken wall of bullets while retreating and relying on the incredible bravery of their heavy machine gunners laying down suppressing fire. They managed to break contact. They bound back to the safety of the base without taking a single casualty.
They crashed through the gates of the base, pumped up on adrenaline, high-fiving and celebrating their incredible survival. But their platoon chief, a highly experienced veteran, isn't celebrating. He pulls Leif aside, away from the men, and sternly checks his ego. The chief asks Leif a simple question. Why didn't you leave OP1 in position to cover your movement back to base? The blood drains from Leif's face. He realizes the magnitude of his massive mistake. He was so siloed, so hyper-focused on his own immediate team's survival that he forgot to use the broader team to cover and move. He failed to utilize his available assets. He took a foolish, completely unnecessary risk that almost got his entire squad killed.
We see this exact type of siloing happen in the corporate world constantly, though thankfully without the gunfire. The text outlines a scenario with a production manager who is absolutely furious at a subsidiary company. Both companies are owned by the exact same parent corporation. The subsidiary handles the transportation and logistics of the materials, and they are constantly delayed. These delays cause massive, expensive downtime for the production team. The production manager calls the subsidiary horrible, views them as an active adversary, and literally tells the consultants, "They aren't my problem. They just need to do their jobs."
Jocko and Leif step into this manager's office, listen to him vent, and then literally point out the window of the building. They tell the manager, "The enemy isn't inside this building. The enemy isn't your logistics subsidiary. The enemy is the competing corporations out there in the market trying to steal your market share and put you out of business." By fighting with the subsidiary, by hoarding resources and refusing to communicate, the manager is essentially shooting at his own team. He is failing to cover and move.
The coaching they provide is straightforward, but requires a massive shift in perspective. Break down the silos. You have to cover and move. The manager is instructed to stop sending angry emails and actually reach out to the leaders of the subsidiary. Build a personal relationship. Try to understand the logistical obstacles they are facing on the road, and ask a revolutionary question. How can our production team help you speed up your timelines? Once the manager shifts his mindset from us versus them to a unified we, everything changes. They start communicating. They invite the subsidiary leaders to their weekly planning meetings. The delays vanish, the process streamlines, and the costly downtime drastically improves.
It all comes back to teamwork. So ask yourself, look at your own professional life. Are you currently fighting against other departments in your company over budget, over headcount, or over who gets the credit for a success? Are you operating in a silo? Look at your personal life. Are you fighting with your partner at home over whose turn it is to do chores instead of realizing you are on the same team trying to tackle the chaos of life together? Remember the lesson from the streets of Ramadi. Cover and move, support each other, communicate.
We have covered a tremendous amount of incredibly heavy, complex ground today. We've walked the dangerous, unpredictable streets of Ramadi. We've analyzed how extreme ownership, the complete, unapologetic rejection of blame and excuses, is the absolute foundation of all effective leadership. We've learned from the freezing surf of BUDS Hell Week that there are truly no bad teams, only bad leaders who tolerate failure. We've seen that you must actively seek out and truly believe in the why of a mission before you can ever hope to lead others to execute it. We've learned that ego is a liability that will destroy your ability to cooperate and survive. And we've seen that cover and move, true teamwork across boundaries and silos, is the only way to achieve long-term victory.
These principles aren't just theories. They mean the literal difference between life and death on the battlefield, and they absolutely mean the difference between success and failure in your career, your relationships, and your personal development.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We spent this entire deep dive talking about taking ownership of teams, of operations, and of corporate missions. But what happens when you turn that magnifying glass inward? What happens when you apply extreme ownership, strictly, ruthlessly, to yourself? I want you to think about a personal failing you've been justifying for years. A bad habit you claim you can't break, a career goal that is completely stalled out, or a fractured relationship with a family member that you continually blame on them. What if, starting tomorrow morning when you wake up, you completely dropped all of your perfectly crafted excuses? What if you blamed no one else, blamed no external circumstances, and took 100% extreme ownership of that specific flaw? What would your life look like in exactly 1 year if you finally stopped playing the victim and started truly leading yourself?
That is a profoundly powerful question to end on and a challenge to us all. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Step up, check your ego, take ownership, and lead. We'll see you next time.